Good morning
Morning.
or good
We sound,
afternoon whenever you're listening to it.
yeah, we sound way more chipper than what we just did.
I know. We were just like, oh, we feel gloomy today. Let's just start the pod so we can talk about it. And then we were like, good morning.
Like that's not actually how I'm feeling. I don't know. I'm just in a funk.
Me too.
And this
I don't know if it's the
weather,
weather. Yeah.
ugh.
Yeah, I meant to get up this morning like pretty early and then I accidentally fell back asleep when it started thunderstorming and then like woke up
hmm
like, oh my gosh, I need to get up right now. And
I woke up just right before my alarm, but it was
Mhm.
so dark outside that I was like, I mean, it's normally still pretty dark when I wake up, but I was like, what time is it? And I just laid there, and then my alarm went off, and I was like, okay, well,
To get up.
I guess, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah. So, how's your week been?
It's been fine. It's just been really busy. Like I've had so many like meetings and or I guess yesterday I had like four meetings yesterday. So it just
Oh,
was like
wow.
meetings all day. And then I always get like overwhelmed. I don't know why my schedule always ends up like that. Like I always have days where I'm just like zero meetings, like nobody schedules a meeting, and then I'll get like four meetings, like or all
Everyone,
scheduled one
same
day.
time.
But then I get overwhelmed because there's some things that just come up throughout the week that you need to take
hmm
care of, like on emails or social media or whatever. And then, like, when it's all in one day, I'm like, feel so overwhelmed that day because I don't have a chance to like check my email or anything. And yeah. And then yesterday, I'm so annoyed at Joe. Sorry, Joe. You don't listen to the podcast, but I still love him, guys. But I'm so annoyed at
Of course, he'll
this
listen to like this episode or
podcast.
something.
Like, but sometimes when you've been with somebody for 12 years, they just get on your nerves certain times of your
Yeah.
life.
Yes.
So anyway, so yesterday, he forgot to pick up Alta for the second time in the last
Oh
like 3 weeks.
no.
And so I was like, I like scheduled like a moment to myself in between two meetings. I had like 30 minutes, like extra. And I like went and got a matcha from a local coffee shop. And I was like sitting there, like answering emails, like catching up on my phone, drinking my matcha in my car. And I get a text from Alda's teacher. Is anybody coming to get Alda today? And it's like 15 minutes past when we're supposed to pick her up. And I'm like, I like called Joe on the. I was like, because I was closest, so I was like, I'll just
hmm
go. And then I was late to my second meeting, so then it got pushed right back to back with my fourth meeting. So then I like had to rush home, throw in my headphones, and get online for a meeting. And so I was just like, I yelled at him. I was like, I know, like we're very different personalities, which works out a lot of times, but then also times it doesn't. Like we're very opposite,
Yeah.
and I'm very type A, so like I'm not gonna forget if like something's on my schedule. And he is the opposite of like he's just very like go with the flow, which is like great sometimes, but also
hmm
I'm like you know that you forget when things are like out of your norm. So like then you need to set a timer on your phone or like do
Yeah.
something about it, like not just be like, oh yeah, I forgot. But then I just hate when like then I go into the school and I'm like 30 minutes late and I'm like, sorry. And I'm like, not, but it's not my fault, but I'm not going to tell you
Yeah.
like, oh, I
The
like,
whole story.
so annoying. Yeah.
Throw him
So
under the bus.
yeah, yeah. But then I'm the one who like is having to be like, sorry. So anyways, it was, I didn't say much after I yelled at him on the car ride over. And then Alda though was like, I'm mad at dad, and then told him that she was mad at him, and then it was fine after that. But I was like, yeah, you go, girl, you tell him.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
So anyways,
Uh,
it didn't like set my whole day off or anything. It's just been like I feel like yesterday was just like a hectic day, and then today it's just like I woke up and it's thunderstorming and gloomy, and I'm just like, blah. I just want it to be tomorrow because tomorrow Taylor Swift's new album comes out.
I was just gonna say, like, are you like so pumped for it? I'm actually really excited for it too, but
Yeah,
um,
yeah, I'm really excited. We're going on a hike with a friend in the morning because Friday I don't work, and but then we're going to me and some of my friends are going to Power and Light is having a Taylor Swift party,
oh
so we're going to
cool.
that tomorrow night. Yeah, so So Joe will make it up to me by babysitting the kids, well, watching the kids all night. So I'm gonna go out with
Yeah.
my friends. So it'll be
That'll
really fun.
be super fun. That'll be
I
super
know.
fun. And I have a feeling like you're probably not like this, but like after the chaos and like all the talking and the meetings and all of that, like, do you feel like you need to like just decompress and not talk to anybody for a while? Do you ever
No,
get
I'm
that
not
way?
like that.
I
No,
feel like that's not like you. It is like me.
it's
Like,
you.
I
Yeah.
don't mind like talking to people and I can do it. And like, even with like our childbirth ed classes, like I love teaching and I love, but then like unintentionally, I drive home in silence.
Yeah. Because it's just a lot. Yeah.
I like get
Yeah.
all the way home and I'm like, I literally have not been listening to anything this entire time.
Hey, you're monotasking like
Yes,
we talked about
monotasking.
in
Yep,
our last episode. So that's
exactly.
good. Yeah, no, I'm like
Yeah.
I mean, I've never been a big partier ever in my life, but I'm like the mentality of like work hard, party hard is more my personality of like I decompress by like doing something fun with people of like I get like
Hmm.
overwhelmed and stressed, but sometimes I get then I'm like, oh well then I wanna like since I've been working so hard, I wanna like go out and do something fun or have friends over for dinner or like go on a date night. Like I wanna like go do something fun. I don't
Hmm.
want to like I get like more mopey if I'm like in my house alone after like just working because then I feel like my whole life is just like work. But that's because I'm just more of an extroverted personality, so I gain like
Yeah.
more energy from like
I'm like,
outward.
that's where we are different. We are very similar in a lot of ways, but that's where we are different.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that that's really, I think a lot of people don't understand that about like introverts versus extroverts. If introverts doesn't mean that you're like always alone or always want to be alone, but it means that you like regain your like stamina from being alone, like you rest in like
Hmm.
aloneness versus like extroverts tend to like regain their like energy and stuff from like being with people and doing stuff. But
Yeah.
there's something about like work meetings that just don't do the same don't fill me up the same way as like going out and doing something fun or like having
Yeah, of
friends
course.
over or talking with a friend. It just doesn't. Yeah, it's the same. I think it's for me too. Like the after you've been doing the same job for a long time, like in our line of work. Of course, births are like always like so different, but like the prenatal meetings are like
Hmm.
you have the same
Monotonous.
structure for every single one. Of course, there's little variations depending on what that client needs, but it's like generally you're saying the same thing and you talk for the whole entire like 2 to 3 hours. It's like you
Yeah.
talking. So by the end, I'm just like, my mouth is tired and I'm sick of
Yeah.
hearing myself say the same thing over and over again. But it's so
Hmm.
important. And I have to remind myself that like they've never heard this stuff before. And so I just
Right.
like you say it all the time.
Sometimes I get done with a class and they're always like, that was a lot of information. And I'm like, yeah, I can't believe you just listened to me talk for 4 hours. Like that must have been terrible. And they're like, this was so great. And I'm like,
I know.
was it?
And yeah, I get that way too. I'm like, aren't you sick of hearing my voice? Because I'm sick of hearing my voice.
Yeah.
I know
Oh
somebody could,
gosh.
like, gosh, somebody could literally like just put a microphone in front of my face and be like, talk about how to prepare for labor for 2 hours. I'd be like, okay, because that's like we give the same spiel over and over.
Yep. Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
funny, like the more when you work in birth, like you think things. The longer you do it, the more you forget that that stuff isn't common knowledge. Like the stuff that you're
Hmm.
teaching isn't like something like for first time parents, especially. It's like all new information. So that's something that
Yeah.
I think is easy to forget. That you're like, yeah, like when babies station -2, and they're like, what the heck are you talking about?
What?
So like, yeah.
I know sometimes when I'm teaching, I'm like, well, I'm sure you've heard of this. And they're like, no. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, and people are like so much on social media now, but it's so like sporadic what kind of information they get, and then it's always
Hmm.
like in pieces too, like the information that they get. Like,
Yeah.
oh, this one little snippet of information. It's not like the full picture, and so sometimes you feel like, oh, somebody must know a lot because they're like, oh, I watch a lot of videos or whatever, and then then like when it actually comes down to like breaking down the information, it's not fully formed. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, partly why I am like, I feel like in this mood is because I'm in that part of my cycle. I'm in
Oh,
that like
yeah.
luteal phase of my cycle. Um, and so that's what we're talking about today is
Yeah,
just,
Ellie's gonna school us on
ugh,
cycles because
I'm not the expert at
but like
all,
this is
but
the same thing that we were just talking about of like the only thing I know about my cycle is like random things I see on social media. I don't know. Like I've never been like walked through like the phases of us. Like I don't know like all the phases of us. Like I mean I
yeah.
know like the words. I can't always match the words with the phrase. And
Hmm.
anyway, so I'm just like I just want like just a general breakdown because you also I feel like well one you're a nurse but two you learned a lot about this during your trying to conceive journey.
Yeah. Yeah. I learned so much, and so much of what I learned, I was like, how come I never knew this? How
Yeah.
come, like, yeah, I mean, no wonder. Like, sometimes, it's just so easy for people to get pregnant, but then when I talk to women who are trying to conceive, I'm like, I'm telling you, it's not as easy as everyone else makes it seem.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of things that have to be in place and a lot of things that have to be, like, perfect
Mm-hmm.
for a baby to actually grow and
Yeah.
make it all the way to term. So it's been so interesting. And I learned a lot about this when I was kind of going the holistic route with my fertility journey. Um, so for those of you that don't know, I tried a couple of like natural cycles with some medications, and those were not working. I wasn't super thrilled with my care, and so then I transitioned. I had a friend who was seeing she was an acupuncturist, but she specialized in reproductive health and helping women conceive through acupuncture, Chinese medicine, herbs, those types of things. And my friend had gotten pregnant after several years of trying, several miscarriages, whatever. So I started seeing her, and ultimately, you guys know, I went through IVF. So it didn't necessarily end in pregnancy, but I learned so much about my body, and it
Mm-hmm.
was working. It was just not working fast enough for me in the moment. So during that 8 months, she had me tracking my cycles diligently, tracking my basal body temperature, really focusing on my diet and how I was eating. And I didn't even really have to think about like what phase of my cycle I was in because I saw her every week and she was like, okay, this week I want you doing XYZ and these are the herbs I'm going to give you. And every week was different set of herbs. So, but I did still learn so much. So then after all of that, learning so much and just having like my eyes opened, when I was
Mm-hmm.
looking for my doula certification, I really, really wanted to have that fertility aspect. So I learned more in my training about just the cycle in general, the hormones that go along with it, the different phases, and then just kind of over time have learned a lot more and kind of dove
Yeah.
into it off and on here and there.
so before before you started trying to conceive, were you on hormonal birth control?
I was,
So
yeah.
I yeah,
I
because
was
I was
on,
too.
yeah, so many people are. I was on uh just like the birth control pill for about 8 years before I stopped taking it.
Yeah, that's around. I was
And
probably on for almost 10 years. I think I was like 14 or
mhm,
15 when I got on. So I guess a
mhm,
little like 9. But so the first time I ever learned about my cycle was because pretty much I had a cycle when I was a teenager, had really, really bad period cramps, ended up at 19 getting endometriosis removed. But I got like, they put me on birth control to
mhm,
manage my periods, which is a lot of people's stories.
yeah.
And then when I had my appendectomy, which if you tuned into last week, I just told that story. So you can go back and listen. That's kind of random. I told that story last week. And they found out that I didn't have any more endometriosis. I got off birth control for a very short amount of time, and I started tracking my basal body temperature through Natural Cycles, the app,
Mhm,
as like my birth control because we were not trying
yeah.
to conceive at the moment. So, anyways, I did that for a couple months, and then I just felt like I was getting like acne. I like did like I but I didn't know at all like how to regulate my cycle, which of course like that's
Hmm.
probably super normal coming off birth control for like after 8 or 9 years, like your body
Yeah.
being a little wonky, being like, I haven't ovulated. Like that's crazy to me.
Yep.
I didn't even know when I went on birth control that like you didn't ovulate. Like I knew
No, I didn't either until I learned.
charging. Yeah, like I didn't know any of that. And so I was having really weird periods, wasn't feeling my best, was getting like hormonal acne a lot and stuff. And so I just went back on, and then I only went was back on for like 2 months before we decided to get off and try to conceive. And then I got pregnant the week I got off birth control with Alda. So
Yeah.
was very lucky that I didn't have like a struggle to conceive. But then I only had like 2 periods between getting my period back with Alda and then getting pregnant. Oh, I'm sorry. I always hit the mic because I talk with my hands. Desi. So now it's like I feel so silly, but literally at 30, because I got my period back a couple of months or like almost a year ago with Desi, I'm learning about my cycle for the first time, like ever, which is just so crazy
Hmm.
to me at 30 years old.
Well, and it changes so much. Like your cycle, the way it was when you were a teenager, it
Oh,
was
yeah.
not going to be, especially if you're on birth control, but like we can talk about that later. But
Yeah.
the cycle as it was is not how it's going to be after having two kids, and
Mhm.
several years later. And I think that's what people don't understand as much, or don't realize. And kind of back to the birth control thing, like, yeah, you're not ovulating. That's how it works. It keeps your body from ovulating, which is so crazy to me because ovulation is so important for your hormonal health and reproductive health, whether you're trying to have a baby or not. It's just you need that fluctuation of your hormones, and it's just crazy that and the spot, well, the bleeding you have, the period you have is not actually a period because you're not ovulating.
Yeah, I know
So,
they
and
say like
no one realizes that a lot of times.
there's no reason you have to get that. The only reason that they like build that into the pills is that people were a little freaked out that they weren't getting a period.
Hmm.
So like they
Yeah.
built that in versus like there's no reason why you like
It's
have to have that.
and it's withdrawal bleeding. So
Yeah.
you're taking the placebo pills, the sugar pills, whatever you want to call them, and it's withdrawal bleeding. It's not an actual period. So, um, which I think is so misleading because when you're, like the first question you get when you, as a woman of childbearing age, when you go to the doctor, when you go to your OB, is like, what's the first day of your last period? And so like they're using that, and I'm like, that wasn't an actual period,
Technically it was 8 years ago. Like
right? Yeah, but what's also so crazy to me that I was thinking about was like, why is that the only question anyone asks us? Like, when not, do you know when you ovulated? Like, just how long was your sex? Just what was the first day of your last period? Like,
Mhm.
okay, it's
Yeah.
just, there's so much more to it. There's so much more to it. So,
Yeah, so why don't we
um,
get into just for all of us
yeah,
newbies, like just the 4 phases because there's 4 phases, right? Of a
yep,
cycle and like what is each phase? Like what happens slash how do you feel
yeah.
or what's at play there?
Yeah, well, and disclaimer, like I said, everyone's cycle is going to be different and unique to
Mhm.
them, especially when it comes to like cycle length and your ovulation day and like when things happen. So just keep that in mind, like as we're talking, that it's not going to be the same for everybody. Um, okay, so there are several hormones that are released throughout your cycle at different times in your cycle, and that's what causes the symptoms that we experience. So we essentially have the first phase is the menstrual phase. The first day of full blood typically is considered cycle day one. So your estrogen and progesterone levels are pretty low, like the lowest they're going to be.
Mhm.
So you can experience fatigue and the cramps, moodiness, stuff like that. Severe period pain and discomfort to like where you can't function is not normal. It
Mm-hmm.
might be common for a lot of women, but it's not normal. So it's a red flag that like something is going on.
Yeah,
Um,
that's something I experienced. So, like, obviously, it was like 9 years before I had a period, and then
mhm,
before having kids, when my periods came back for that short amount of time, I had really bad period cramps. And then that's something interesting about since having kids, I don't have really any period cramps, maybe some slight discomfort. I think my body kind of like
mhm.
reset and my cycles reset after having kids.
Yeah.
And I feel so much better like off birth control. I feel so much
Mhm.
better. And I'm like, wow, this is how I was supposed to feel all along with
Right.
periods. Like I feel good off of birth control. That's I don't want to ever go back on. And I don't get like cramping, even though my period's like just as heavy as it has
Mhm.
always been. I mean, maybe some
Yeah.
slight little discomfort, but not really. So yeah, that was really interesting because I've heard people say that and I was like, that's not true. And then when I
Yeah.
now that I've experienced it, I'm like, oh, like you can't have a period without severe pain.
Well, and so often when we have really painful periods, lots of cramps, stuff like that, um, the answer from a physician's perspective is here's some birth control. That should help.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of actually finding the root cause of
Mm-hmm.
why it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really interesting. So any cycles can last anywhere from, some women have short cycles like 3 days, 5 days. It can go to like 7 days. Anything past that's pretty much too long. Like
Yeah.
there's not a reason why it's too long. Um, but like during this time, there's goals that kind of go along with this, that, for each phase in your cycle, and we can talk about cycle syncing later, but it's similar to cycle syncing. If you've not heard of that, that's where you kind of like, you eat a certain way during certain parts of your cycle, you do certain activities, you exercise a different way just to really like kind of honor your body and take care of yourself and where you're at. So during the menstrual phase, you're really focusing on making sure you're staying hydrated. You're having iron-rich foods, which makes sense because you're losing nutrients with all the shedding of that uterine lining.
Mm-hmm.
Really want to take it easy on exercise. So like walking, yoga, some of that can really help with cramps and boost your mood. So walking and those aerobic activities are going to kind of decrease cortisol levels. And then prioritize rest and relaxation to support everything that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so it's not uncommon to be kind of tired in those first couple of days. And then like as you get through it, your energy level might
Mm-hmm.
increase. So then the next phase actually overlaps with menstruation. It's the follicular phase. So it's called the follicular phase because your body is releasing follicle stimulating hormone, so FSH, and it's kind of revving up for ovulation to release mature follicles. So that's if you can remember that.
Yeah, and
um,
follicles are created on our ovaries, correct?
yes, so follicles contain the eggs. So they're like fluid-filled sacs that contain the eggs inside.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's
So
released. Okay.
because we already have eggs in our ovaries from the moment like we have all of our eggs. So during
Mhm.
the follicular phase, do they kind of like mature them and get them ready for
Mhm.
ovulation? Is that what happens?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So then hormones are kind of shifting during this phase. So estrogen slowly, gradually rising, which is where you start to get that mood stabilization and a little bit more energy. And it's starting to stimulate the uterine lining to start kind of like thickening a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So less bloating, like I said, increased mood, energy levels, and fatigue kind of starts to go away. Still want to make sure that you're eating. Like eating is just important for hormone health, like in general. Like eating a balanced diet, nutrient-rich foods, all of that's really, really important. And then continuing with like the gentle exercises and just really, really tuning into your body. Like, what do you feel like you can do? If your, mood is not that great and your energy level is not that high, you're not going to go do like a HIIT workout or something,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I
Um,
think that's where sometimes we, like, as women, get pulled into like male dominated like exercise fields, or like,
mhm.
and stuff that like are not really made for our hormones, because I don't know a lot
Yeah.
about male hormones, but they don't have cycles like we do. They
No.
have generally stable hormones like throughout periods of time, and so they can do the same type of activities, every day and stuff like that. And it's better for usually like our bodies to listen to our cycles and the patterns that our body like naturally falls into. And I think sometimes, in obviously I'm a huge feminist if you know me at all, but like in feminism and like women going back to like getting into the workplace and like trying to go into more
Mhm.
male dominated fields, instead of like, this is a whole nother tangent, sorry, instead of like
No, it's okay.
switching the male dominated fields to be accommodating of like what females need, us as females pushed our just like made our put ourselves in like tried to accommodate ourselves into like a male driven world of like how males built society, instead of asking society to like I'm a fan of going of like us working as women like personally, but like instead of trying to like make business structures and stuff to like
Mhm.
accommodate what we need, it like instead we're just trying to like push ourselves into an environment that was not
Yeah.
built for us. And so
Well, and so much research that's out there on like exercise and diet and stuff like that is done on males.
studies on men, yeah.
Like, it's really not, it really is not, there's not a lot of like focus on females. And I mean, it's out there, of course, or we wouldn't know anything.
No, but
But,
it's not
um,
nearly as much, yeah,
but it's
like it
not like the
not.
majority, like a lot of stuff that's shared is like, it's male dominant
Mm-hmm.
and not helpful to us and our bodies and our hormones because there is just, it's just such a different way of like eating and fueling our bodies
Yeah, I
than
think
it
a
is
lot of
for
people
men.
just think like, oh, it's too complicated to look at this stuff with women because there's so much fluctuations and they have,
Yeah.
all this stuff, versus just being like, oh, men are like easier. And I'm not like a researcher or anything, but that's
No.
just my take probably on it, is that it's just like easier to like look into these things and do these studies on men and such, because they don't have these major like hormonal fluctuations and stuff throughout the month.
Yeah.
Getting, excuse me, I'm sorry guys, every week I've been coughing on this podcast. But like, so what hormones, so like so you said estrogen and progesterone were really low during um the menstruation phase. Do they
Menstruation.
start to pick up in follicular phase or not till later?
Yeah. 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 So estrogen starts to pick up in the follicular phase, which is why
Mm-hmm.
you start to kind of have that increased energy, mood stabilization. Because when estrogen's really, really low, you feel fatigued and not great. And your mood is kind of like meh, you
Yeah.
know. So Um, and so it starts to pick up, and you might start to feel in this, like towards the end of the follicular phase. So the follicular phase lasts all the way up until ovulation.
Okay.
Um, and so you might start to feel like as you get closer to ovulation, like a little bit more motivated, a little bit more adventurous. And so I thought it was really interesting. It makes total sense after hearing it said to me. But I heard a TikTok last week, and it was a dad trying to understand his teenage daughter. And like, is like, I just feel like I can't talk to her about anything. And the woman who was talking to him, she specializes in reproductive health. And she was like, well, do you know her cycle? And he was like, well, no. And she's like, well, I encourage you to learn it because if you can catch her on days somewhere between like 2 to 10, she's probably going to be more willing to like talk to you, be more open, be more like, have more ability to do like conflict resolution and stuff like that than if you catch her like anywhere else in her cycle.
Yeah.
And so I just thought that like, yeah, that makes total sense. And the more I hear, the more I really look at myself and my cycles and try to pick out like, okay, this is probably why I'm feeling this way, or this is why I'm feeling like it makes complete sense. So,
Yeah.
okay,
I'm
so
honestly
estrogen
really,
starting.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I made a TikTok this weekend because I was ovulating and I was feeling so productive, and I get so
Yeah.
productive when I'm ovulating. And Joe was like just wanting to have a chill weekend, and then I was like, we ended up switching all the kids' rooms around and like and anyway, so we were just like he was like annoyed at me all weekend, but I was like I have to take advantage of it when I feel that way because then I
Yes.
don't feel that way the rest of the month, and so I do like have to just take advantage of that energy that I have and everything.
And it's something that just guys don't understand. Like,
Hmm.
you know, you ask me if I want to have people over like this point in my cycle, and I'm gonna be like, not really.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to entertain people.
But it's
Yeah.
kind of funny when I was thinking about it. I was like, oh, our like uterus is trying to make a home for. I was like busy working, trying to make a home for a baby, and we're like busy working, trying to like get our life together, like during ovulation.
Yes. Yeah, it's so funny how it like you can kind of like correlate it. It's so cool. Okay, so I totally just nerd out in this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I could sit and listen to videos and podcasts and stuff all the time. So, anyways, okay, so estrogen starting to rise, and then another hormone that starts to kind of come into play is luteinizing hormone, or LH. So, if you've ever been on a trying to conceive journey or whatever, and you're doing those ovulation strips or tests, it's testing your LH, your luteinizing hormone, and that surges just before ovulation. So when you're in the trying to conceive world, you're checking, and when you get that surge or that peak, your peak day, then you're like, okay, it's time to have sex. It's time to make a baby.
Yeah.
Because you know ovulation's coming, and ovulation is so short, like the actual like process of
Yeah,
ovulating.
you have to have like
Um,
sperm ready, right? Like
yes,
you know,
yes. You
ready
need to
to
have the
go.
sperm ready so you don't miss your window.
Yeah.
And so LH, the way it works is it surges and it releases the most mature and dominant egg from those follicles. So kind of
Hmm.
like picks and chooses. Okay, we're gonna, and sometimes you'll release one from the right side, sometimes you'll release one from the left side. It's not uncommon for it to switch. And so if you, I don't know, do you notice? I do. And I think I started noticing this when I was trying to conceive and like really paying attention, but like I noticed discomfort during ovulation.
Yeah.
Um,
Ever since having kids, I get like really sharp ovulation pain every single month. Like I literally am
yeah,
like, it feels like I'm laying an egg. Like quite
yeah,
literally, I'm
yeah.
like a chicken.
And you
Like
know, I never realized what that, I don't think I ever really experienced that until I was going through IVF and I was doing all the stimulation meds to really stimulate a bunch of follicles to like
yeah.
start releasing and growing. And then I felt it afterwards because I had ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. So I had something similar to that discomfort. So after I had kids, I was like, I remember reaching out to my IVF doctor. I was like, is this normal? Is this okay? And I'm like, I know I'm not your patient right now anymore, but like, this is so uncomfortable.
Hmm.
And the only time I experienced that was when I was doing IVF. So anyways, it's not uncommon for it to kind of switch sides. But that's usually why you have that pain is because you're releasing an egg on that side. And so ovulation day, the actual day that you ovulate is very, very different for a lot of women. It can happen earlier in your cycle. It can happen later in your cycle. Depending on how long your cycle is. So, so typically
Is
when
there
you
a
hear stuff, it's
benefit?
like day 14.
Yeah. Is there a benefit when trying to conceive if it happens like earlier or later? Or not necessarily?
Um, you don't want it to happen too early and you don't want it to happen too late.
Okay.
You kind of need, there's kind of a sweet spot. And so it is kind of balancing hormones and really looking at the root cause of why it's happening, maybe early or late. You want it to happen somewhat in the middle of your cycle. Um, because if it happens too late, then you don't have as much time to like grow that lining to sustain a pregnancy.
Mm,
You don't have a thick enough lining, for it to actually like embed. So anyways,
okay.
I digress. So it lasts 12 to 24 hours. So you have like that 3 to 5 day fertile window. Okay. So kind of like a couple
And that
days leading up to ovulation.
that window is mainly just because sperm can live like 3 to 5 days, correct? Because like
Yeah.
the actual
Yep.
ovulation happens quickly, but you have those
12
days
to
leading
24
up
hours. Yeah.
to ovulation that you can have sex and there can be still a live sperm in there to fertilize the egg, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly, exactly. So sperm, typically outside of like those days leading up to ovulation, your uterus and cervical mucus and all of that is actually kind of a hostile environment for sperm, so they don't live as long.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but leading up to, as you're kind of your body's getting ready, they can live in the cervical crypts, so these little like folds in the cervix, and they can live in there. So they go up, they live in there, and then as you get to ovulation,
Little
what?
sperm just living in my uterine crypts.
They just live in there. They live in there and they're just waiting. And so the cervical mucus starts to change. So as your estrogen peaks and rises, your cervical mucus is changing. And so this is another something that I didn't really pay much attention to until I was going through it. But so it changes to help bring the sperm to the egg. So a lot of people think, oh, the sperm just like swims up to the egg and it just like it's sperm. And
No,
they're
us
like, no,
women
it's
do
us.
everything.
We are doing it all. We are doing it all. We are, like we are having all of this good cervical mucus, this fertile cervical mucus, which for those of you that don't know is usually like an egg white consistency. It's really stretchy and usually pretty clear. And so that helps transport the sperm with that, the strong sperm, the strong swimmers, the ones that can continue to survive
The
up
ones we want to
into
fertilize our eggs.
the ones we want to fertilize the egg. Yeah, so estrogen peaks, it releases the egg. You usually, like you said, have lots of energy. Your mood, you have usually a pretty good mood. Your libido might increase. Like all those things make sense, right? Like you know, our body's ready to make a baby.
Yeah.
Um, whether
Biologically,
you
our body
are
wants to.
trying, yes, whether
Whether
you're trying
mentally,
to
whether
or
maybe or
not.
not, our body is like, this is
And the
it.
body is kind of, that's what its purpose is at
Have
that
you ever
moment.
seen
So
have you ever seen the girl who does the vagina skits?
I don't think
she
so.
like she dresses up as like a uterus, like an ovary, and then like a penis, a sperm, like all the things, and does like skits like your vagina is a hotel, and like the sperm are coming, and then the like the egg gets so excited. It's like I've made such a lovely home for you, and then it's like, oh no, he's wearing a condom.
That's so funny. That's
Anyways,
hilarious.
I'll have to go see. I don't think I follow her, but she's like come up on my page a couple of times. But I'll have to see if I can find one that we can share on social
Yes.
media with our talk because with this talk because
Yeah.
they're pretty funny comical versions of what happens to our in our bodies during
Yeah.
ovulation. What are some other signs of ovulation? I know you mentioned cervical mucus. I know you've tracked basal body temp. That's like the only
hmm
thing I ever did. So I don't know if you want to kind of let people know why does basal body temp work, like how does our temperature change during like ovulation and stuff to be able to catch it.
Yeah, I actually don't know why it increases. But essentially what you're looking for, you do have to,
It
when you're cycle
increases.
tracking,
Yeah.
yeah, it increases. But when you're cycle tracking and you choose to use basal body temperature, which is almost like a necessary, like to track ovulation using the fertility awareness method or FAM, where you're not using birth control, but you're still kind of tracking your cycles and watching for ovulation and making sure you're ovulating, learning about your
Mm-hmm.
body, all the things. So there's a few different things that we're looking at. So we want to look at cervical position, cervical fluid consistency, and our basal body temperature. Okay, so I'm going to just kind of go in that order. So cervical position is where your cervix is located in relation to your vaginal opening. So if you were to go in, insert two fingers and to feel your cervix, when you are at the ovulation stage, it's going to be more forward,
Mm-hmm.
softer, and a little bit more open. which
Mm-hmm.
makes sense if, our purpose,
You
our
want it
body's
to
purpose
repair
during
you,
that
yeah.
time is to fertilize an egg. So, and then outside of that, usually it's harder to get to, it's further back, it's closed, it's a little bit more firm. So looking at cervical position, which can be tricky, and then cervical mucus, like I said, usually it starts out kind of like creamy, milky, very, very scant, a very, very small amount, around menstruation and the follicular phase. And then as we move closer, it becomes more watery, it gets stickier and stretchier. And then after ovulation, it's either completely dry or it's that like thick, gummy texture. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so all of those are normal. When it's not normal is when it's like smells really bad, has weird tint to it. Yeah, so those things are not normal. But
Yeah.
cervical fluid is important, and it is very normal to have all that discharge throughout your cycle. So as
Yeah.
you kind of pay attention to that, you'll notice like, oh yeah, I have really great energy, and I've got all this cervical mucus happening when I go to the bathroom. And
Yeah.
you might not notice it, like it's not like always like dripping out or in your underwear, but a lot of times you notice it when you wipe.
When you wipe.
It's you
Yeah.
can feel the difference in wiping, and
Mm-hmm.
see it on the tissue. And then basal body temperature. So basal body temperature works by tracking your temperature every single day with a thermometer. I don't know if did you use an actual basal body temperature
Yeah.
thermometer? Yeah,
Yeah.
you kind of have to
Yeah.
really notice because it's very, very subtle fluctuations.
Mm-hmm.
But your temperature essentially increases after ovulation for a short time.
Mm-hmm.
And
And then if you
so
get
your track,
pregnant, doesn't it stay ovulate? Stay
it it
elevated?
will stay. Yep, it will
Okay.
stay elevated. Yep. So so you're tracking temperature every single day. Usually you want to do it before you do anything in the morning, before you
Mm-hmm.
sit up, before you get out of bed, before you take a drink. You want to check it when you've had at least 5 hours of sleep, um, consistent, consecutive 5 hours of sleep. And you can check it under your arm, under your tongue, or vaginally. Um, but you're doing it every single day and you want to do it the same every single day. So you have to pick something that works best for you. And um, yeah, so you're checking it every day with a basal body temperature thermometer, special one that goes to 2 decimal places because the fluctuation is so subtle.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some apps out there now that will allow you to put your temperature in. There's the Aura Ring that you can
Yeah.
track with. There's a lot of
I know
cool
that's very
technology out
popular,
there.
the Aura Ring now. And I use Natural
Yeah.
Cycles, the app, when I did
Yep.
it, and I really liked it. It was just very like easy of like you put it in and it just the algorithm tells you if you should use other protection or not on that day.
Hmm.
I know that now the Natural Cycles app works with the Aura Ring too, if they like work
Yeah.
together. Also, but
Yeah.
there's lots of other apps. I know you also just paper charted. So,
Yeah, you can paper chart. And I also used Fertility Friend.
oh,
Um,
okay.
it was kind of I don't know what it's like now, but when I was using it, it seemed kind of outdated, but it allowed me to share all of my data with my holistic provider. And
Hmm.
so she was able to kind of see what my cycles were doing and kind of analyze those charts a bit.
Yeah, which something that's cool. I think the Aura Ring, I again, like I'm not in a place where I'm trying to get pregnant, so I don't track anymore. I just like I it's interesting now. Well, I never tracked, but it's interesting now. Like now, I'm even though I'm not trying to get pregnant, I'm like the most just aware of my cycle. Of like now that
Hmm.
I know more about it, I can tell like, oh, I'm ovulating. Oh, I'm about to get my like I can just tell based on like some of these indications, which I've learned so much
Yep.
already, so I'm excited to like know more about it. But
Yeah,
but I think the Aura Ring has a partner app. So like
it
your
does.
partner, yeah, can have the partner app and then it will clue your partner into the different phases you're in your
Hmm.
cycle and give them tips on like what you might need or how you might be feeling during those phases as well, which I think is so amazing and so cool.
It is so cool. I wish that I like that was a thing. Maybe it was and I just didn't know about it, but it's been a while, so it probably wasn't. But yeah, I wish something like that would have existed because it would have been so incredibly helpful. So, to really understand, your cycle and to know when you ovulated, you have to it's retrospective. Like you can't really tell, that ovulation is coming. Sometimes you will see a slight drop in temperature before ovulation occurs, but your temperature can still fluctuate throughout the beginning phase of the cycle. So just because you see a drop doesn't necessarily mean that ovulation's coming.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll see a rise, and after you see like 3 consecutive higher temps, you can pretty much say, okay, yeah, I ovulated that one day. You
Okay.
can see it on the chart. And then like you said, it'll stay high until you either have your period or you're pregnant. And it'll start to drop again when you have your period.
Okay.
So it takes a little bit of time to do like consecutive months of doing that to really be able to look at it, but you can tell
Pinpoint the
so
day.
much. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you can pinpoint the day and you can tell so much about your cycle. You can see how long each phase is of your cycle. So if there's an abnormality in the length of each phase, or like I said, if you're ovulating super late or super early, whatever it is, then you can kind of start digging for those root causes with your provider to figure it out. So yeah,
That
pretty
makes
cool.
sense.
It's a pretty cool, and along with that, like again, like I said, you're kind of also uh, noting every day your cervical mucus and your cervical position. And
Mm-hmm.
also things like stress, alcohol use, sleep disturbances, illness, those things are really important to note because your temperature is obviously going to change. So then you can kind of start learning, okay, when I'm really stressed, this is what my temperature kind of looks like. So you're not super concerned that it looks a little funky because you know that you are super stressed about something
Mm-hmm.
or whatever. So it can tell you a lot about your cycle. So when you're ovulating, you want to focus on healthy fats and proteins to support that hormone production. This is when you usually feel really good about strength training or high intensity workouts. Like you said, your energy levels are really, really high. And so then you also might feel super creative or might want to plan more activities, um, have more times like with social outings, stuff like that. So that's really common during the ovulation phase. And then, like I said, once that 12 to 24 hours passes and ovulation has occurred, then you move into your luteal phase. So that's the last phase of the cycle. So progesterone rises right after ovulation and it continues to stay because it's helping your uterus prepare for implantation of a fertilized egg if it fertilizes. And so that's progesterone's main job is to just thicken that uterine lining. So you can imagine if you ovulate later on in your cycle and your luteal phase is really, really short, that lining is not going to be very thick.
Yeah.
And that can cause issues with implantation.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. And then you have,
It's like
this is
chemical
where I'm at. Like,
pregnancy. No, sorry. A chemical pregnancy is when the egg is fertilized, but it doesn't successfully implant. Correct.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And so this is, like I said, this is where I'm at in my cycle right now. I'm kind of like in the middle of my luteal phase. But you can get really like with that progesterone rising, kind of some of those similar like early pregnancy symptoms, which is where people start to freak out like, oh my gosh, I might be pregnant and they're not, but they're freaking out because they don't really understand their cycle or how it works. And so
Mm-hmm.
you can have mood swings, fatigue, irritability, you can be really tired, fatigue. I don't know, I said that twice. Bloated. You can feel really, really hungry towards the end of the luteal phase as you, that's like that PMS symptom, that comes before your period.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're not pregnant, progesterone drops and your period starts. And
Okay.
then you start the whole thing over again. So that's kind of how that works. So you want to eat lots of complex carbs during this time. That helps kind of stabilize your mood. And I feel like sometimes naturally we do this anyways, like leading up
Yeah.
to our period. Like it's just like carb
There's like
loading.
a lot of like things like that are just normal in society of being like,
Yeah,
I want chocolate, I want carbs, are really like
yeah,
there's a root cause for that being
Yeah.
normal of like I'm tired,
Yeah.
I'm couldn't feel good. Like there's a root cause of why generally women are that way at those different phases of their cycles.
Yeah. Yeah, and then just give yourself grace during this time. Like, focus on relaxation, self-care, stress management. I was literally thinking before I had jumped on here today, I was like, I need to schedule therapy. I feel like I need therapy,
Yeah.
therapy session. Like, so really just like lean into that intuition and like really just take care of yourself. Um, and yeah, it's just so cool to think about how we feel during each phase and like you said, the things that we just naturally do, try not to fight against it. That's what cycle syncing is. It's really
Yeah.
working with your body and your hormones and trying not to like fight against those things that you're experiencing.
Yeah. Like if you have the flexibility to like work from home or something, do your work from
Hmm.
home days during your luteal phase and then maybe go into
Hmm.
the office during like, follicular and ovulation or schedule
Hmm.
more meetings during ovulation or if you have the option to schedule a bigger presentation during that phase, like do those
Yeah.
types of things. Can be really helpful to just be feeling more
And
like
I've
up to them and confident.
Yeah, and I've even heard some cool things about like if you are doing social media, like for a business or whatever, really structuring your social media around your cycle. So like when you're feeling creative, um, usually you're not yet in that mood to be really productive or motivated. So when you're feeling creative, throw all those ideas in somewhere, OneNote, a spreadsheet, your, notes app. And then when you get to that point where you feel really productive and motivated to like stay on task and focus, then you can create content.
Yeah,
And
gosh,
then
I
during your
honestly
luteal
I
phase, you
just
can just
feel
chill.
I feel prettier during ovulation. Like I just feel
Yeah,
like my skin looks
you're
better. Like
glowing.
my body is being like, please implant a baby inside of me. Like
Yeah,
it's just like generally I just feel like better being in front of the camera and like stuff like that
yeah,
during that phase. If I feel more just
yeah.
better about myself. So
Yeah, it's just so interesting. And so you said like you're not tracking anything, and neither am I. I really like just focus on like my cervical fluid. I notice that. I know how long my
but you
cycle is.
tend
I do
you tend
track.
to just yeah, you tend to just start noticing these things once you learn
Mhm.
about them.
I
Mm-hmm.
track my cycle as far as like, when my period starts, when it ends. Like I look at how long my cycle is or was the last month, to make sure that it wasn't like randomly 36 days or something crazy when it's normally, 29 to 32 or whatever. But I have been kind of interested in, um, going a little deeper into these things again that, I've done it in the past, but going a little bit deeper because my husband refuses to get a vasectomy and I refuse to go on birth control.
Is he good
So
on
I'm like, maybe I
Joe?
should be like really, really tracking things so that I don't end up with a third child when I'm not quite
That's why
planning for
my
that.
I Joe got a vasectomy because I was just like, well, I'm
Yeah,
not going back on birth control because I feel really good off of it
yeah,
right now,
yeah,
and so I'm not doing it again. And yeah, and he definitely didn't want another baby, so luckily
yeah,
he agreed to it because I love the post vasectomy life. I gotta say, any guy who's considering it, it's a huge win in our household. It's
yeah. Well, maybe you can talk my husband into it. My husband's like, no, I'm not doing that. Like,
it's been
well,
it's been a big positive, but yeah.
make everyone's life easier.
Yeah. It really is not that of course not many guys listen to our podcast, but I think, it's funny. Joe's become like not like a spokesperson, but he'll say to his guy friends all the time, like, oh, just go get a vasectomy when you're not having kids, because it's just like no more condoms, no more worrying
Yeah.
about unplanned pregnancy. And then like, yeah, it was a pretty easy procedure. So
Yeah, and I mean,
maybe
there's always like potential for like
oh yeah.
complications. Like I have friends who
Yeah,
have
of
had
course.
like complicated
But in
complications,
terms of
but
like getting your tubes tied, it's a higher
Yeah.
risk surgery getting your tubes tied, as well as like I just had a lot of anxiety about like having, I know it's not like super common, but I think you do have an increased risk of like ectopic pregnancy and stuff with like getting your
Hmm.
tubes tied. And so I
Yeah.
just had like anxiety about it. Plus, I've had a few abdominal surgeries. I just didn't really want to have another like
No.
abdominal surgery. So, yeah,
No. And the recovery for an abdominal surgery like that is way more than.
different, yeah, than a
And we've
vasectomy.
already freaking carried their children and birthed them. Like, why do we need to go through anything
Yeah,
else?
yeah. It's a struggle between like yeah, just get the vasectomy and like yeah, you're allowed to have personal choice over your body, like kind of thing.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. Like, I'm not going on birth control, but you definitely should get a vasectomy.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this was a good conversation. This was fun.
Yeah, yeah, and nothing, I think that there's a lot of talk in the holistic world like against birth control, and I think that it's something that there's like certain things that are going to work for certain people based on their not even their bodies but like their life and their phases of life. Do you know what I mean? Because like having an unplanned pregnancy is obviously like a lot scarier to a lot of people than like being on birth
Yeah.
control, pressing their cycles for like a couple years of their life. And so I think it's just like a good conversation. There was this recent social media post that was like birth control's fine, like and whatever. And it's like you need to listen to like everybody's like doctors need to listen to people's like stories of like it not being right for them, because I don't think a lot of that like anecdotal evidence is going into play in like the medical world, the people saying I feel so much better off of birth control. I know personally, like my sex drive is like way better off of birth control. Generally, I just feel more confident. I feel healthier, like all of the above off of birth control. And so like I'm super happy being off of it. I wish that there was options given to me when I was having issues that weren't
Mhm.
just birth control, because I wasn't
Yeah.
having sex when I was 14, and like I didn't need to be on
No.
birth control for that reason. But sometimes like birth control, IUDs, those things are great options for people during different phases of their life, because an unplanned
Hmm.
pregnancy is like a much bigger
Well, and I
piece.
think so much of it too is the education. Like,
Hmm.
how does birth control work in your body? And, this is how it works and this is what you might experience. And yes, it helps with this, but then, later on, like, this is what we would need to do differently depending on what season of life you're in. And it's just, there's just not a lot. And I think what frustrates me even more is that it's just given as a band-aid for
Hmm.
symptoms that are occurring that are actually abnormalities. They're
Yeah.
not just, oh, yeah, this is just a symptom of having periods. This is just part of being a woman. Like, it's so frustrating to me.
Like having
Um,
a cycle is one
that,
of the most normal things about being like a woman between the ages of 12 to 40 or whatever. And so like
yeah,
there's if your cycle is off, there's probably a reason for it, because that's just like a normal
well,
part of our lives as women that should just be a typical thing that we experience.
yeah, and we are so complex because of all of our hormones, and not just the hormones we talked about, like thyroid and all of the other hormones that are in our bodies are so important to our overall health and wellness. And so many of those abnormalities, those red flags, like I know a lot of women are like, well, I don't care about ovulation because I'm not trying to have a baby.
Mhm.
Well, if you look at the research, those that ovulate have a lower risk of so many other things that happen later on in life, like osteoporosis and all kinds of stuff. I mean, the research is out there if you ever want to dive into it. But so yeah, ovulation is essentially to have a baby, but also it's part of being a woman. Like that is
It's
part of being a woman
it's
is
part of the
ovulating.
hormones we're supposed to experience like in
Yes.
our bodies as women. Yeah, totally. And I think
Yeah.
that something that's so cool about cycle tracking too is just in our line of work, we see so many people who are pregnant who have zero familiarity and insight into their body and how it works. And that is like scary. Like then pregnancy and stuff is scary to them because they don't understand their body and they don't even know
Hmm.
where their cervix is, like that kind of stuff. So like
Yeah.
learning about what is normal things to experience and where different parts of your body are and what they're supposed to feel like and be like and all those things can be so great for you to just learn as a woman and be in tune
Hmm.
with your body and what's happening in your body and the parts of your body and stuff, because that can carry you a lot throughout feeling more confident and being more aware of, red flags to look out for during, like if you're more aware of your
Hmm.
body, you just are more aware of things that are happening that are wrong or not wrong and stuff to like carry you through your life. So
Yeah, there's this book before we go. I want to make sure I share this with everyone because it's such a great resource. It's called The Fifth Vital Sign. And it talks about ovulation being your fifth vital sign as a woman. So, and how it correlates to your overall health and how it really should be looked at. So, and it talks about all of this type of stuff, cycle charting, fertility awareness, birth control. It talks about everything.
yeah.
So if you're looking for a good book to learn more, take a deeper dive into this stuff, the Fifth Vital Sign, 100% recommend it. And
Yeah,
we can
we'll have
link
to
it in the
the
show
Amazon
notes.
link. Yeah, for sure. For
Yeah,
sure. Well, thank you so much. I learned so much.
I'm
I
glad you
really
did.
Yeah, like I knew like all I like knew the words for all the phrases. I wasn't sure. I wasn't ever sure where for if follicular and luteal, like if they were
Yeah,
switched
how
or
they
where
go.
they were. Like I obviously know menstruation and ovulation, and I didn't know a lot about the hormones that go into play. So I did learn a lot,
Yeah,
and I'm glad to know,
good.
and I hope this was helpful because you would think as women who have been of menstruating for 15 years or whatever that we would know more about our bodies, but like we don't. And I hope that
Hmm.
like our kids know more about their bodies at a younger age and are able to be in tune with these things at a younger age to just feel more
Yeah,
confident in their bodies and what's going on with them. So
yeah. And I would love to eventually get some of the holistic, one of the holistic providers that we know of to come on and just share a little bit more in depth about certain topics as it relates
yeah.
to
Yeah, like
women's
more
health.
like
I think it would be
some
really good.
supplements that you can use to support
Yeah.
yourself and like all that kind of stuff during the different phases of
Hmm.
life. Yeah, yeah, I would love that too.
Yeah.
So
So
I
cool.
hope, yeah, I hope that this
All
is helpful
right.
for you guys and
Yeah, me
let
too.
us know what you think. This was a good episode. It's fun.
Yeah, it was good. It was fun. So thanks for letting
Okay.
me teach.
Yeah, no problem. We all went to cycle school today.
Yes, yeah.
Well,
All
we should have learned
right.
in health class in eighth grade, but now we're learning it now.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Right?
Um,
Uh,
okay, see you guys next week.
all right. Bye.